So yesterday, I was just kind of trolling around on Twitter as per our usual arrangement, and I came across this insane display from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And it really does speak to our bizarre cultural moment, because the fact is that the new anti-racist movement, the sort of Ibram Kendi, Robin DiAngelo anti-racism movement that has become so popular on the left, that has really overwhelmed the old version of what racism was. Racism used to be defined, as we've been talking about, as you believe in the supremacy or inferiority of a group based on characteristics they cannot control, like skin color. This was defined as white supremacy or as racism, depending on who was being the racist and who was being the victim. Well, that has now been changed to the entire system is racist, and if you are complicit in any system that produces inequality, then you are part of the problem and you are a racist. And to be anti-racist, you have to fight the system. Well, this sort of idea has now been promulgated with your taxpayer dollars at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, a project of the Smithsonian Institution. And I want to go through the display that they put forth, because not only is it hideous and horrifying, it's overtly racist against Black Americans. I mean, that is what it is. It's incredible. It's incredible. Like, you cannot distinguish the verbiage on this poster from anything David Duke would say. It's impossible to actually tell the difference, because in the end, what it suggests is that all the hallmarks that make a person or culture or a civilization successful are white things. Right? David Duke would say this in order to tout white people. The National Museum of African American History and Culture is saying this in order to downgrade the quote-unquote standards of success. And this has real ramifications, because when we look at problems in American society, we look at problems like police brutality, or if we look at problems like income gaps between Black Americans and white Americans, and educational gaps between Black Americans and white Americans. These are specific problems with specific solutions. Right? There are things we can do about some of these things. There are things we can't do about some of these things. But if politics is the solutions business, right? Politics is the place you're supposed to go to discuss a problem and then come up with an answer. That is the goal of politics, is solution making. But our politics these days has become more about feelings. I've said before on this show, I've talked about this, that when my wife and I first got married, and when you first get married, there are always some bumps that you have to iron out. Thank God my wife and I have an incredible marriage. We've been married 12 years now with 3 kids. Very happy. But at the very beginning, there is a sort of situation that would continually arise. And the situation was, my wife would come to me with a problem. And I, being a doting husband, would say, okay, let's talk about the solution. And she'd get upset, because it turns out that what she didn't want was the solution. What she actually wanted was for me to just hear her feelings, right? She wanted me to show that I cared about her experiences. And this made no sense to me, because I am a solutions-oriented person. And so I literally had to say to her, sweetheart, I need you to tell me upfront in the conversation whether this is a conversation where you just want me to show sympathy, or is this I'm kind of a robot this way, or is this a conversation where you want me to provide a solution? Well, politics is supposed to be all about the latter, right? It's also supposed to be about solutions, but virtually none of politics in modern America is about solutions. And in fact, if you offer solutions to any of these problems, if you suggest that maybe a solution to the income gap is to culturally press forward with the cause of less single motherhood, if you suggest that maybe one of the things we should do is push school vouchers, maybe one of the things we should do is push standards of education inside homes that value education more, if you suggest that maybe one of the things we ought to do is put more police officers in high crime areas so as to crack down on crime and provide a safe haven for businesses and investment that raises the tax base, increases the funding for public schools, and provides jobs for more people, then you are part of the problem, you see. Politics is, if you're Senator Tim Scott and you come forward with a bill that is meant to take the first steps toward curbing police brutality, you are hit with more vitriol by the left than if you had never provided any sort of solution at all, because the solution is not the point. The complaining is the point. The castigation of the entire system is the point. Shoring up the system is the problem. If you shore up the system, then all you are doing is merely supporting a system of brutality and racism and cruelty. Now, that is not a recipe for a future for the country. There cannot be a future to a country that basically suggests that anytime there is a problem, if you try to solve it, you yourself are part of the problem. That is a movement that is destined to destroy the country. And this is what my new book is about, How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps, out next Tuesday. You can get it at Amazon, or you can buy a signed copy at dailywire.com/Ben. It's all about this. It's all about the quest to destroy America, with a vision of America that sees America as pure power politics and the system itself as an indicator of hierarchical brutality. Right? This is something that the left is pushing these days very hard. And now it is being embedded in cultural institutions. So first of all, I think most Americans should be able to look at this and say this is ridiculous. But most Americans, I think, are not looking at this anti-racist, the new definition of anti-racist, which is to say disestablishmentarianism, get rid of the system. They're not looking at this and saying this is ridiculous. They've been so trained to treat any accusation of racism as gospel that they are willing to even hear the redefinition of racism, even if it means that they are supposed to now silence themselves, silence their common sense, tear down the system that provides them the opportunity for a civilized and wonderful life. That's how powerful the charge of racism has become. You can even shift the definition of racism, and people will still be so cowed by the very word with a completely different definition that they will go along to get along. So here is the new definition of whiteness and racism. Okay, get ready for this, because this is amazing. And this is from taxpayer-sponsored National Museum of African American History and Culture. Aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. This is a full poster. White dominant culture, or whiteness, refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power in America, we all have internalized some aspects of white culture, including people of color. So in other words, if you're a black person and you believe in any of the following lists that we're going to get to in a second, any of the following principles, if you're black and you believe this, it's because on the inside you're white. You've now turned into an Oreo, right? That is this is what this is saying. It is saying that if you have internalized any of the things I'm about to explain to you, then it is because you have now internalized whiteness. You have now suffered from assimilationism, as Ibram Kendi suggests in How to Be an Anti-Racist. Okay, here are some of the things that are associated with whiteness and white dominant culture. Okay, these are some of the things. And again, I challenge you to tell me how this is anything different from what David Duke would say, the former Grand Wizard of the KKK. Rugged individualism is about white dominant culture or whiteness. The individual as the primary unit, self-reliance, independence and autonomy, highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assumed to be in control of their environment. You get what you deserve. So individualism itself is just a white thing. If you believe that you have agency in your own life, which by the way is the precondition to any success in this life or any other, if you believe that you have the power to shape your own future, that is your whiteness talking. That is your internalized whiteness, because only white people have historically had such power, except for the fact that now everybody has that power in the United States and legally has had that power since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Okay, other things that are aspects of whiteness in the United States. Family structure. That's a white thing. Again, this is according to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Family structure is a white thing. The nuclear family is a white thing. Wife as homemaker, husband as breadwinner, children as independent, and that they should have their own rooms. Apparently, if your kids have their own rooms, it's because it's a white thing, which is real weird because when I was growing up, I shared a room with all three of my sisters until I was 11 years old. So I guess we weren't white then. So that's kind of strange. Emphasis on scientific method is a white thing. I'm not kidding. It says this is a museum. Okay, the museum is saying that if you believe in the scientific method, it's because it's a white thing that you have internalized. Objective, rational, linear thinking is a white thing. Cause and effect relationships are a white thing. Quantitative emphasis is a white thing. Data analysis. Basically, if you think like a rational human being, it's because you've internalized whiteness. Okay, this is the most racist thing in the entire world. This is basically suggesting that if it were not for white people, there would be no rationality. Rationality would not exist. There's not been a single brown person steeped in their own culture and human history who thought in a linear, quantitative, cause and effect way, which is bizarre, ahistorical, and insane. Okay, if you emphasize the scientific method, that's only because you're white. David Duke could have, I'm telling you, David Duke could have written this. Because David Duke's like, you know what's great about white people? Individualism. Their scientific thinking. Their brains. Right? Because David Duke's a racist. Okay, this is a racist document, but it's masquerading as an anti-racist document. And I'll explain why in a second. Okay, other things that are white. If you mention Western civilization, that's a white thing. Because Western civilization is not important, apparently, in the broad view of humanity, despite the fact that Western civilized values have now taken over most of humanity and have been responsible for the uplift and freeing of billions of human beings. The heavy focus on the British Empire in history is a white thing, because apparently the British Empire was not important except for the fact that the sun literally never set on the British Empire. So there was that. It was kind of an important part of human history. Work ethic. The Protestant work ethic is a white thing. Hard work as the key to success is a white thing. It is an aspect of white dominant culture. If you believe that you should work hard and you should work before you play, I'm serious. These are white things according to this museum. Not kidding. Also, delayed gratification is a white thing. If you're oriented toward the future. Now again, every aspect here, everything I'm talking about, these are the preconditions for success in any free system. Being a person who focuses on the future, delayed gratification, hard work, rugged individualism, a belief in data and science. Like these are the preconditions to success in a free country. These are being labeled white things. And if you believe in them, you have internalized the white culture. Other things that they say are white are things like value on ownership of goods, space, and property, which, okay, Just the utter insanity of suggesting that only white people have ever valued ownership of goods, space, and property. Really, why are there tribal chiefs in literally every civilization ever known to man, and they are the richest, most powerful people? Why? If you follow rigid time schedules, if you view time as, if you are punctual, that is a white thing. Being punctual is a white thing, apparently. If you believe in English common law and protecting private property, if you believe that intent counts in justice, if you believe that there is a difference between manslaughter and first-degree murder, if you believe that people should have to show intent to be blamed fully for a crime, then this is an aspect of whiteness. And finally, decision-making. If you make decisions, if you are oriented toward solutions, if you must always do something about situation, that means that you are oriented toward whiteness. I'm going to get into more of this and what exactly this means and how this destroys the country and how woke white people bowing to this bullcrap, how these woke white people are destroying the country. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.